Clara Whitmore pressed her 3 boys against the wall and begged them to remember a name that was not their own. 7 years ago, the Harringtons had thrown her out pregnant and penniless, and tonight she had walked straight back into their house to save the only land her sons had ever called home, not knowing the man who'd cast her aside was waiting on the other side of those doors. If your heart is racing, already subscribe and stay with me all the way to the end. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from, so I can see just how far this story travels. She had 4 minutes, maybe less. Clara Whitmore knelt on the floor of the little side room off the great hall, and her hands would not stop shaking as she worked the top button of William's coat. The boy held still the way he always did, watching her face instead of her fingers, and she hated that he was old enough now to read her. "Mama," he said, "your hands are cold." "They're fine. They're shaking." "They are fine, William." She softened it the second it left her, because that was the trouble with the eldest of the 3. He caught everything the way a man catches the change in weather before the sky shows it. "Listen to me now, all 3 of you. Look at me." Thomas was already grinning at something. Thomas was always grinning at something. Oliver had his small hand wound into the back of her sleeve, the way he had since he could grip at all, and she could feel the pull of it against her arm like an anchor line. "When those doors open," she said, "we are not the Whitmores. Do you understand me?" "We're not," Thomas said. "No. Tonight my name is Mrs. Marlowe. I am a widow. Your father passed of a fever in the spring, and we have come down from the north, and we keep to ourselves, and we do not answer questions. If a fine lady asks you a thing you don't care to answer, you bow, and you tell her your mama keeps you close. That's all. That's the whole of it." "Why?" Thomas asked. "Because I said it's so." "But why, Thomas?" She caught his chin gentle and turned his bright face to hers. "I will tell you everything one day. I swear it to you on my own life, but tonight you give me this. You give me one night where you are good and you are quiet, and you hold to your brothers, and you do not let go. Can you do that for me? Can you do that one thing?" The grin faded. He nodded. "William." "Yes, Mama." Oliver, the littlest one, didn't answer with words. He never did not when it mattered. He just tightened his fist in her sleeve until she felt it in her shoulder, and that was the only yes she had ever needed from him. She stood, smoothed her skirts. The dress was borrowed and a half size wrong, and she'd be found out by any woman in that hall who knew cloth, but it would do for the hour she needed. 1 hour, 1 signature. That was all this whole terrible night came down to. Find Judge Pembroke. Get his name on the deed before the bidding closed at midnight. Walk out the same door she walked in and never set foot near these people again as long as she drew breath. The land was 40 acres, and a sagging house, and a well that ran sweet, and it was hers, and it was the boys', and it was the only square of earth in the whole of Virginia where no one had ever told her she didn't belong. The Harrington estate wanted it. Of course they did. They wanted everything that touched their borders the way a river wants the low ground. And if she missed tonight, if Pembroke's signature went unsigned, the land went to the highest hand, and the highest hand was always, always theirs. She had not come here to dance. She had come here to fight, and she had brought no weapon but her own steadiness and 3 boys in matching coats. A servant rapped twice at the door. Clara crouched one last time and looked at all 3 of them at once, and her voice came out lower than she meant it to. "Hands," she said. "All of you. Hold on and don't let go." William took Thomas. Thomas took Oliver. Oliver reached up and slid his fingers into hers. The doors opened, and the whole long, bright room turned to look at them. She felt it the way you feel sun on your neck. Every face swinging her direction, the talk dropping half a note, the way a crowd of strangers always sizes up a stranger. She had braced for it. She lifted her chin and walked, and the boys walked with her 4 small steps to her 2. And for 10 whole seconds it was working. It was going to work. She was Mrs. Marlowe, a widow from the north, and no one in this hall knew her face. Then Oliver let go of her hand. She felt the loss of it before she understood it. By the time she turned, all three boys had stopped dead at a long table along the wall, and Oliver was already on his toes, reaching toward a glass dish of sugared cherries, glistening dark and red under the light. "Oliver," she breathed. He didn't hear her. Thomas had spotted them too, and Thomas didn't reach. Thomas just looked up at his brothers with that face that meant trouble was already decided. William, who should have known better, who always knew better, had stopped because his brothers had stopped, and the three of them stood there together in their dark blue coats, identical down to the cowlick. Three small boys lit up gold and gawking at candied fruit like it was the gates of heaven themselves. Three identical boys, standing in a row, in the middle of the Harrington ballroom. Clara's whole body went to ice because she understood a half-second too late exactly what she had just done. She had spent 7 years keeping these children out of sight of anyone who might do the arithmetic. And she had just marched all three of them in a matched set into the one house on earth where the arithmetic meant something. She reached for Oliver's collar, and across the long room, a man set down his glass on the rail beside him without looking at it, and the glass tipped, and the wine ran out across the wood, and the man did not move to right it. He did not move at all. Clara followed the stillness the way you follow a sound in the dark. She found his face, and the floor seemed to tilt under her. Nathaniel Harrington was looking at her. Older now, there was gray starting at the temples and lines around the mouth she didn't remember putting there, but it was him, unmistakable. The man whose name she had once carried, the man whose mother had stood in a doorway in the rain and told her she was nothing, and never had been, and to go. He was not looking at her dress. He was not wondering who the stranger was. He was looking past her. He was looking at the boys. She watched it happen on his face in real time, and it was the most terrible thing she had ever witnessed, and she could not look away from it. She watched him count. 1, 2, 3. She watched his eyes go from boy to boy to boy, slow the way a man reads a sentence he cannot believe is written down. She watched the color leave him. She watched his hand close on nothing. 7 years. 7 years she'd survived. The rain, the road north, the cold winter she'd birthed all three alone in a borrowed bed with a midwife who pitied her, and a fever that nearly took Oliver before he'd drawn a week of breath. 7 years of being no one's wife, no one's daughter, no one's concern of building a small clean life out of nothing with her own 2 hands and her own stubborn back. And she had carried it all the way to here, to this room, to this very minute, only to lose the whole of it in the time it took a child to reach for a cherry. A woman near the punch was already leaning to her neighbor lips, moving behind a fan. Another turned to look, then looked again. The room was beginning to understand what it was seeing the way Nathaniel had understood, only slower in 2s and 3s, a whisper passing hand to hand like a coin. "Clara Whitmore," she heard faint from somewhere to her left. "I'd swear on my life that's the Harrington girl, the one that—" "Hush, hush, she'll hear you. Look at the children. Look at them. Just look." Clara got her hand around Oliver's shoulder and pulled him gently back to her side, and then Thomas, and then William, put himself in front of his brothers without being told, 7 years old, and already squaring up like a man at a fence, because William felt the room turning the way she did and didn't yet know its name. "Mama," William said. "It's all right. Mama." He was still watching the man across the room, the still man, the one nobody else had quite caught yet. Why is that man looking at us like he knows us? The whole night came down to that one question, and Clara had no answer for it that wasn't a knife. "He doesn't know us," she said. "Eyes forward, baby. Eyes on me." But he's coming this way. He was. Nathaniel Harrington had taken one step and then another away from the rail, and the spilled wine and the crowd between them was already parting, because that was what crowds did for a Harrington in a Harrington house opening before him like a field before a plow. He wasn't hurrying. That was the worst of it. He moved slow, careful like a man walking up on something he was afraid would bolt, and his eyes never once left the 3 boys at her side. "Clara." She heard it from behind her. A different voice, low, a woman's close to her ear. And a hand came to rest light as a leaf against her elbow. She turned ready to fight. The woman was old and rich, and dressed in gray silk worth more than Clara's house, and she had the kind of face that had been watching rooms like this one for 50 years and missing nothing in any of them. Clara knew her by sight. Everyone knew her by sight. Mrs. Eleanor Vale. The widow whose word could lift a family up or sink it in a single dinner, who feared no scandal because she had survived a dozen of her own. If this woman chose to say one sentence aloud, Clara was finished. "Mrs. Vale," Clara said very low. "I am Mrs. Marlowe, a widow. From the—" "You are Clara Whitmore," the old woman said, just as low. "And you have got about 40 seconds before that man reaches you, and this entire room learns more than is good for any of us. And you have 3 children who do not yet know whose floor they are standing on. So you will stop lying to me, child, and you will listen." Clara's mouth went dry. "I have nothing to give you," she said. "If you mean to ruin me, do it. I'm past minding." Something moved in the old woman's eyes. Not quite a smile, but the memory of where one used to live. "I have buried 2 husbands and watched this family throw away a great many things they had no right to throw away," Mrs. Vale said. "I am old, and I am rich, and I am bored, and I have decided in the last 40 seconds that I should very much like to be on your side instead of theirs. Now." She straightened, and her voice lifted to the bright carrying tone of a hostess, loud enough for the nearest fans to hear. "Mrs. Marlowe, how good of you to come down. And these must be your boys. Come, come, you handsome young men. There is lemon ice through here, and not a soul to share it with, and I will not be argued with by anyone under 4 feet tall." The boys looked at Clara. Clara could not breathe. "It's all right," Mrs. Vale said, gentler only to her. "I'll keep them whole, and I'll keep them near. You go and do the thing you came to do, and do it fast. You have until I run out of patience with small talk, which I warn you is not long." Her eyes flicked once toward the advancing man, then back. "He will not follow the children. Whatever else he is, he will not make a scene in front of them. I have known that boy since he wore short coats himself. Go." And then she had her hand out to Thomas, who took it because Thomas took everything offered, and William looked once more at the still man, and once at his mother, and Clara made herself nod. "Go with the lady," she said. "Hold your brother's hands. I'll be quick. I promise you I'll be quick." Oliver wouldn't let go. He had his fist in her sleeve again, and his face was turned up at her, and there were no tears in it yet, but they were coming. She could see them gathering the way clouds gather, and her heart broke clean down the middle. "Oliver," she whispered, and crouched and pried his fingers loose one at a time, hating herself for every one. "I am right here. I am not going anywhere you can't see me. You watch the lady give you ice, and you save me a taste, and you count to 100, and when you get there I'll be back. Can you count to 100? He nodded. "Out loud, so I can hear how far you've got." "1," Oliver said, watery. "2. That's my boy." She let Mrs. Vale draw them off toward the far doors. 3 blue coats and a gray silk skirt, Thomas already chattering. William, glancing back. Oliver, counting low and steady under his breath. 3, 4, 5. And she turned around with her heart in her throat to find Nathaniel Harrington stopped. Not 6 feet from her. Close enough now that she could see his hands were shaking worse than hers had been. For a moment, neither of them said anything at all. The room watched. She could feel it. 100 eyes and 100 fans, and 100 half-finished sentences hanging in the warm summer air. "Clara," her name came out of him cracked like he'd had to break it loose from somewhere it had been buried a long time. "Clara, those boys. My name is Mrs. Marlowe. Don't." He said it like it hurt him. "Don't, please. Not to me. Not after—" He stopped. His jaw worked. He looked for one unguarded second like a man who had been struck across the face and was only now feeling it. "How old are they?" "That's no business of yours." "How old are they, Clara? You have no right to ask me anything in this room." Her voice stayed level. She'd practiced it on the long road down here, the level voice, the one that gave nothing. "Not their ages, not their names, not the color of their hair, which you can see well enough for yourself. You lost the right to ask me one single question 7 years ago, and I notice it took you about 4 seconds to start asking anyway." His head went back an inch like she'd slapped him. "I didn't know," he said. "Clara, I swear before God, I did not know." "Know what exactly?" she said. "Be careful what you confess to in front of all your fine friends. They're listening. They love this. Half of them watched your mother put me out, and not one of them said a word, so I would mind your tongue if I were you, Mr. Harrington. There's an audience." He flinched at the name. Mr. Harrington, the same name he'd once asked her to take in a garden on his knees before he'd had the spine to defend it. "I was told you left," he said, low and ragged, now leaning in so the room couldn't drink it. "I was told you took money and went north and wanted no more of me. I was told, I know exactly what you were told." Something old and hot rose in her chest, and she pushed it down because she could not afford it, not here, not yet. "I was there for the lies first telling, remember? I just wasn't there for the part where you believed it." His eyes closed. When he opened them, they had gone wet, and that somehow was unbearable to her, because she had imagined this man's face 1,000 times in 7 years, and not once had she let herself imagine it like this, undone and grieving, and a half-second too late for any of it to matter. "There are 3 of them," he said, barely a sound. "Clara, there are 3. "Yes, 3. "Their names," she said. And she did not know why she gave him this, except that the littlest one was somewhere across the room counting out loud, and she needed suddenly fiercely for this man to know that they had names, that they were real, that they had been alive and loved and growing. The whole long time he'd thought himself childless. Their names are William and Thomas and Oliver. William reads anything you put in front of him. Thomas can make a stone laugh. And Oliver, her voice caught just once, and she mastered it. Oliver was so small when he came that the midwife told me to say my goodbyes. I didn't. I held him 8 days and 8 nights, and I told him he was not allowed to leave me, and he listened. He's the one who held my sleeve just now. He's counting to 100, so I'll come back." Nathaniel Harrington made a sound she had never heard a man make. "I have to go," she said, and stepped back and put the level voice on like a coat. "I have business with Judge Pembroke, and I will not be turned from it, not by you, not by your mother if she dares show her face, not by anyone in this room. So, you'll excuse me." "Clara, don't follow me." She looked at him then full on for the first time, and let him see exactly how little of her was left for him. "You want to do one decent thing tonight after 7 years of doing nothing at all. You stay where you're standing. You let me get what I came for. You don't make a single scene that puts those children's faces in this town's mouth tomorrow morning. You owe me that. You owe them that, and they don't even know your name." She didn't wait to see if it landed. She turned on her heel, and somewhere behind her she could hear it starting up again. The whisper, the fans. That's the Harrington girl, 3 of them. All his look at them, look, and somewhere ahead of her, faint and stubborn and steady, a small voice she would have known in any crowd on earth was counting. 21, Oliver was saying. 22, 23. Clara Whitmore squared her shoulders, fixed her eyes on the far side of the room, where an old judge stood with a glass in his hand, and a deed she meant to win, and she walked. Judge Pembroke was a broad man, gone soft in the middle, with a glass of claret in one hand, and a habit of laughing before the joke was finished, and Clara reached him with her heart slamming and her face perfectly still. "Judge Pembroke." He turned pleasant and half-drunk. Yes, have we? "Mrs. Marlowe, we corresponded. The Whitmore parcel, the 40 acres off the river road. You hold the deed in trust until midnight, and I've come to complete the purchase as agreed in cash money tonight." She kept her voice low and quick and businesslike, a woman who had no time for charm. "I have the bank draft here. I need only your hand on the transfer." "Ah!" Pembroke blinked. "Ah, the river parcel. Yes. There's been—" He cleared his throat and looked just for an instant over her shoulder toward the far end of the room. There's been some interest in that land, Mrs. Marlowe. Considerable interest. Late this evening. Clara's stomach dropped, but her face gave nothing. The terms were settled a fortnight ago, she said. First buyer to present full payment before midnight. I am that buyer, and it is not yet 11, and I have the full payment. There is nothing to discuss. Well now, in the ordinary way. In every way. But the Harrington estate has made an offer of half again the price, Mrs. Marlowe. And they've a long association with this court, you understand, and a man in my position. A man in your position, Clara said, signs his name to what is lawful, or he explains to the bar why he didn't. Pembroke's smile faltered. He wasn't used to being spoken to that way, least of all by a woman in a borrowed dress. He drew himself up. You're very bold, he said, for a widow from the north. I am very tired, she answered, of men deciding what I'm allowed to keep. The draft judge. Your pen. Now. For one long terrible moment, she thought she'd lost it. Thought the half-again offer, and the long association, and the warm claret had already done their work, and she'd carried 3 boys into this house, and exposed all 4 of them for nothing. She felt the whole evening teetering on the edge of the judge's good humor. Then a voice came over her shoulder, smooth and pleasant and cold as a creek in February. Judge Pembroke, surely you wouldn't disappoint a lady. Clara turned. She had been ready for Nathaniel. She had braced her whole body for Nathaniel. She was not ready for the woman standing beside him. Mrs. Harrington had aged the way hardwood ages gone dark, and harder, nothing softened. She wore black with a collar of jet beads, and she held herself like a woman who had never once in her life been told no, and survived it intact. Her eyes went over Clara head to foot slow, and there was no shock in them at all. No surprise. Nothing. That was the thing that turned Clara's blood to ice water. The woman wasn't surprised to see her. She'd known. Hello, Clara, Mrs. Harrington said. You're looking well? Cheap, but well. Mother. Nathaniel's voice was low and shaking. Not here. Hush, Nathaniel. She didn't even glance at him. She was looking at Clara, and she was smiling, and the smile was the most frightening thing Clara had seen in 7 years. I wondered when you'd surface. I told myself a girl like that doesn't drown. A girl like that floats back up eventually, generally when there's money in the water. She tilted her head. And here you are, bidding on land, with a banker's draft. My, we have come up in the world. Judge Pembroke is about to sign, Clara said, holding the level voice with everything she had. Aren't you, Judge? Judge Pembroke, Mrs. Harrington said, is about to do nothing of the kind, because I am about to offer twice the price and donate the difference to this very charity in front of every soul in this room, and you, Clara, are about to discover that nothing has changed at all. You were poor then, you're poor now, and the Harringtons still own the ground you're standing on. And there it was, the old familiar cruelty, delivered light as a dinner remark, exactly the way it had been delivered 7 years ago in a doorway in the rain. Clara felt the years collapse. For 1 second she was 22 again, soaked through and pregnant and being told to go. But she wasn't 22. She had 3 boys across that room who were counting on her, one of them counting out loud, and she had crossed 300 miles in 7 years to stand here, and she had not come all that way to lose to this woman twice. Double the price, Clara repeated. In cash, tonight. Have you got it on you, Mrs. Harrington? Because the terms are full payment before midnight, and a promise made loudly in a ballroom is not a payment. I have the draft in my hand. You have a speech. A muscle moved in the old woman's jaw. Nathaniel will write the draft, she said. No, Nathaniel said. The single word cracked across the little space between them, and for one instant nobody moved. Mrs. Harrington turned to look at her son like she'd misheard him. What did you say to me? I said no, mother. He was pale, and his hands were still shaking, but his voice had stopped shaking, and Clara saw with a strange lurch. She didn't have time to name that something in him had broken loose in the last quarter hour, and was not going back. I will not write that draft. I will not buy that land out from under her. I will not— His breath went ragged. I will not do one more thing in this life that you tell me to do to that woman. Not one. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. He turned to the judge. Sign Mrs. Marlowe's transfer. The estate withdraws its interest. I'll put that in writing tonight if you need it, and I'll thank you to do it quickly before my mother says another word. Pembroke looked from Nathaniel to Mrs. Harrington to Clara and back again, a man caught dead in the middle of a feud he did not understand, and his survival instinct, sharpened over 30 years on the bench, made the decision for him. He set down his claret. He drew a pen from his coat, and he signed. The scratch of the nib was the loudest sound Clara had ever heard. There, Pembroke said, blotting it, eager to be rid of all of them. Done. The parcel is yours, Mrs. Marlowe. Free and clear. Congratulations and good evening. And he fled into the crowd with the bottle. Clara stood holding the deed and could not feel her own hands. It was hers. The land was hers. The well that ran sweet, and the sagging house and the 40 acres where no one had ever told her she didn't belong, hers and the boys forever, and not even God could take it back now. She had won. And it tasted like nothing, because Mrs. Harrington was already turning the full weight of her attention onto something far more dangerous than land. Where, the old woman said quietly, are the children? Clara's whole body went cold. There are no children, she said. Don't! Mrs. Harrington's voice didn't rise. It dropped, and that was worse. I have eyes, Clara. The whole room has eyes. 3 boys, identical, in matched coats, in my house. Her gaze slid to her son, and there was something almost like triumph in it, the look of a player laying down a card she'd been holding all night. Did you tell him? Did you tell my son they're his? They are not your concern. They are my blood. They are my children, Clara said, and the level voice was gone. Now burned clean away, and what was left underneath it was 7 years of cold rooms and empty cupboards and a baby who'd nearly died in her arms. You threw me out into the rain. You stood in your own doorway and you told me I was nothing, and I had always been nothing, and there was money on the table if I wanted it, and the road if I didn't, and I took the road and I walked, and I birthed those boys alone in a borrowed bed 300 miles from here, and you have the gall. You have the gall to stand in front of me now and call them your blood. The fans had stopped moving. The whole nearest quarter of the room had gone silent and was making no pretense at all of not listening. You'll lower your voice, Mrs. Harrington said. I will not. There are people. Let them hear. Clara was past the point of caring now, far past it, and there was a wild freedom in it that frightened even her. Let every soul in this room hear it. Let them hear what the great Harrington family does to a girl who isn't grand enough. You want them to know I'm Clara Whitmore Fine. I'm Clara Whitmore. You want them to know whose sons those are? Ask your son. Look at his face. The whole town's already done the arithmetic. Eleanor told me so herself. So the secret you spent 7 years keeping is sitting in this very room, eating lemon ice, and there isn't one thing left for you to hold over me. You've nothing. You spent it all 7 years ago. Mrs. Harrington's face did something complicated. Eleanor, she repeated. Eleanor Vale has the children. Yes. And for the first time all night, the old woman looked afraid. It lasted only a moment. But Clara saw the flash of genuine fear cross that hard face, and she did not understand it, not yet, but she filed it away, the way she filed everything. You little fool, Mrs. Harrington breathed. You handed my grandsons to Eleanor Vale. What does that, Mother? Nathaniel had stepped between them now, and his voice had gone very flat and very careful. What are you saying? Why does it matter who has the boys? His mother didn't answer him. She was already turning, already moving toward the far doors where Mrs. Vale had led 3 small boys, and there was nothing of the languid social cruelty left in her. Now there was only an old woman moving fast, and that more than anything that had come before sent terror straight through Clara's chest. Where are my children? Clara said, and she was already moving too. What is wrong? What aren't you telling me? Clara. Nathaniel caught her arm not to stop her, but to keep up his face stricken. Clara, what does she mean? Let go of me. I'm coming with you. I said let go. Clara. He didn't let go. He matched her stride, the two of them cutting through the crowd now with Mrs. Harrington's black-clad back ahead of them like a flag, and his voice cracked again. Whatever it is, whatever's wrong, those are my sons too, and I am not going to stand in a ballroom while something happens to them. Not again. I did that once already without knowing it. I will not do it twice. She had no answer for that. She didn't have time for one. They came through the far doors into a quieter room, a sort of withdrawing parlor where the music came muffled through the wall, and Clara's eyes flew across it once, twice frantic. Mrs. Vale was there, seated perfectly composed, a small dish of half-melted ice in her hand. There were two boys at her knee. Two. Thomas. William. Not Oliver. Where is he? Clara said, and her voice came out of her in a register she didn't recognize. Where is Oliver? Where is my littlest? Where is he? William looked up at her with a face gone white, and that face told her everything, before he opened his mouth, because William always knew before anyone. William caught the weather before the sky showed it. He was counting, William said. He got to 50-something. And then a lady came, a different lady. She said she was taking him to find you. She said you sent her. His chin was trembling now, this serious 7-year-old who never trembled. Mama, I told him not to. I told him to hold my hand. But she had a kind voice. And she said your name, and he wanted you so bad, Mama. He wanted you. He went. The room tilted. What lady? Clara heard herself say. William, what lady? What did she look like? Young, Mrs. Vale said. And the old woman was on her feet now, and for the first time all evening she looked her age, and then some gray and shaken the fan forgotten in her lap. Clara. I turned my back for the length of a sentence. One sentence. I had the boy's hand. I'd have sworn I had it. A young woman, plain dress, dark hair, said she was the children's nurse. Come to fetch the little one to his mother, and she said it so easy, so sure, and Thomas said, her voice broke. Thomas said she knew his name. She knew his name, Clara repeated numb. She called him Oliver, Thomas whispered. She knew, so I thought it was all right. Mama, I thought, and behind Clara very quietly, in a voice that had gone absolutely without color, Mrs. Harrington said, it was the Calloway woman. It had to be. God help us all. Clara spun on her. Who? She said. Who is the Calloway woman? What have you done? What have you done? Mrs. Harrington's face had gone the gray of old ash. There is a debt, she said. An old debt of this family's. A bad one. The kind that doesn't get spoken of at parties. I thought it buried. I thought it managed. But debts of that kind have long memories, and they have been watching this house, and they have just been handed the one thing in all the world that would bring a Harrington to his knees. Her eyes went for the first time to her son, and they were full horribly of something that might once have been tenderness. They've taken the child to make us pay, and they took the littlest because the littlest is the easiest to carry. Who are they? Nathaniel. His mother grabbed his arm. Nathaniel, listen to me. There is no time. They will not have gone far, but they will go fast, and they will send word of their price before morning. And if we wait for that word, we are already too late. Do you hear me? You have to go now. Now. But Nathaniel was not listening to his mother. Nathaniel had crossed the room to the two boys, to William, who was crying silently, and Thomas, who had stopped grinning forever, and he had gone down on one knee in front of them in his fine coat on the parlor floor. And he was looking at them the way Clara had watched him look at all three of them across the ballroom an hour ago, like a man reading a sentence he could not believe. You're William, he said softly, and you're Thomas. Yes, sir, William whispered. You held on to each other. Both of you. You did right. His voice was steady, somehow steadier than Clara's, steadier than his own had been all night. I'm going to go get your brother. Do you hear me? I'm going to go get Oliver, and I'm going to bring him back to your mother before he's finished being scared. That's a promise. And the men in my family keep their promises. He swallowed hard on that last word like it cost him. Even when it's late, even when it's 7 years late. He stood. He looked at Clara. And whatever else had passed between them this night, whatever rage and grief still stood between them like a wall, in that one moment they were not Clara Whitmore and Nathaniel Harrington, wronged wife and faithless husband. They were two people who had just learned in the same breath that their child was gone into the dark. "Tell me where to go," he said to his mother, low and hard. "Now. Everything. Every name. Every place. You've kept this secret from me my whole life, and it has just walked off with my son, so you will tell me all of it. Mother, and you will tell me fast, or I swear before God I will never speak to you again, as long as either of us draws breath." Mrs. Harrington looked at her son. She opened her mouth, and across the parlor, the muffled music from the ballroom played on, bright and oblivious, while a mother stood holding a deed to 40 acres, she would have set fire to with her own 2 hands in that instant, to have her littlest boy back in her arms, counting safe his fist in her sleeve. "Their name is Calloway," Mrs. Harrington said. She said it the way a person confesses a thing they have carried so long. It has grown into the bone, and for a moment, the only sound in the parlor was William's small, ragged breathing and the muffled music through the wall. 12 years ago, she went on, and her voice had gone flat and far away. There was a family on the land east of ours, decent people, not grand. The father took sick, and the debts came due, and they came to this house for help, and your father—" She did not look at Nathaniel. "Your father would have given it. He was a soft man, but I would not let him. I bought their notes instead. I called them due. I put that family off their land in a single winter, the mother and 3 children, and the eldest boy was sent away to work off what could not be paid, and he was 12 years old, and I never thought of them again." Her chin lifted, but there was nothing proud left in it. "The eldest boy was named Samuel Calloway. The young woman who took your child is his sister. They have waited a long time, Nathaniel. They have waited for the day this family loved something enough to lose it." Clara stared at her, and a horror that had nothing to do with the missing child rose up alongside the one that did. "You did to them," Clara said slowly, "exactly what you did to me. Yes. You put a mother and her children out in the cold over money. Yes, and you'd have done it to my boys tonight without blinking. Bought the land out from under them. Put us off it. Watched us walk." Clara's voice was shaking now, not with fear, but with the size of what she was seeing. "It's all you know how to do. It's the only thing you've ever known how to do. Clara." Mrs. Harrington looked at her, and the hard old face was coming apart at last, fault line by fault line. "There is a child in the dark right now because of what I am. Scream at me tomorrow. Scream at me for the rest of my life. I will sit and take it. But not tonight. Tonight you let me help you get him back, because I am the only one in this house who knows where the Calloways will have gone." "Where?" Nathaniel said. "The old Calloway place. East. It's a ruin now, nobody's worked it in years, but it's theirs by blood, and they'll have taken him there. It's the only thing this family never managed to take from them, the bare ground their house stood on." She turned to her son. "Nathaniel, they will want money. They will send a letter. But that is not what they want. Not really, and if you go to them with money in your hand, you will lose that child, because money is the very thing that ruined them, and they will spit it back in your face. Do you understand me? You cannot buy this back. We have spent 40 years buying things back, and it does not work. It has never worked. It is the rot at the center of all of it." "Then what do they want?" Clara said. Mrs. Harrington looked at her. "They want a Harrington to know what it feels like," she said. "That's all. That's the whole of the debt. They want us to feel it." And then Clara was moving because she had stopped being able to stand still, because somewhere east of here in a ruined house, her littlest boy was crying for her, and she did not have it in her to listen to one more sentence about the architecture of this family's sins. "Then they'll feel it back," she said halfway to the door. "Because I am about to walk into that house, and I am the one person on this earth who knows exactly what it feels like, and I am going to look that girl in the eye and tell her so. Nathaniel, are you coming or not?" "I'm coming." Then come. What happened in the next hour, Clara would never afterward be able to lay out in proper order. There was the scramble for a carriage, and Nathaniel shouting for horses in a voice she'd never heard from him. The voice of a man who had finally found a thing worth losing his dignity over. There was William's hand fisted in her skirt. At the last second, William saying, "Take me, Mama, take me!" I should have held him, and Clara crouching to take his face in both her hands and saying, "No, baby, no. This was never yours to hold. You stay with the gray lady, and you mind your brother, and you wait for us," and Mrs. Vale gathering both remaining boys to her gray silk side with a fierceness that dared anyone to come near them. There was the dark road east, the horses run hard, Nathaniel beside her, on the seat with his jaw set and his hands white-knuckled on his knees. And there was somewhere in the middle of all of it, a single quiet exchange she would remember the whole rest of her life. "Clara." He didn't look at her. He looked straight ahead into the dark. "If we get him back." When we get him back." He swallowed. "I have no right to ask you for anything. I know that. I've known it since the second I saw you across that room and watched you flinch at my own name. But I need you to hear me say it once in case I don't get the chance again. I should have come after you. 7 years ago. The morning my mother told me you'd gone, I should have ridden after you, and I should not have stopped until I found you, and I didn't, because believing her was easier than believing I'd married a woman my family would do that to. I chose the easy lie. I chose it every single day for 7 years. And 3 boys grew up in the cold because I was a coward with a comfortable life." His voice was steady, but only just. "I'm not asking you to forgive that. I don't think you should. I'm only telling you I know it, so that whatever happens tonight, you'll know I knew." Clara looked at the side of his face in the dark. "You want absolution," she said. "I don't have any to give you. I used it all up keeping 3 children alive. I know, but I'll tell you what I've got." She turned forward again. "I've got a boy in that house who is the gentlest soul God ever made, and he is frightened, and he is going to need somebody steady when we walk in, somebody who won't fall apart, and won't make threats, and won't turn it into a war over a child's head. Can you be that? Forget what you owe me. Can you be steady for him for the next half hour of your life? Yes. Then that's all I want from you tonight." The Calloway house, when they reached it, had 1 window lit. Clara was out of the carriage before it fully stopped, and Nathaniel was right behind her, and she went up to that door, and she did not pound on it like a Harrington come to collect. She knocked. Once. Twice. Quiet. "My name is Clara Whitmore." She called through the wood, and she kept her voice low and even and human. "I've come for my son. I'm not bringing the law. I'm not bringing money. I came in a borrowed dress, and I've got nothing on me but a deed to 40 acres and 2 empty hands, and I'd like to come in and talk to you if you'll let me." Silence. Then the door opened a crack, and a young woman stood there with a lamp and a frightened, furious face, and behind her, on a low cot against the far wall, Clara saw a small shape sitting up with its knees drawn to its chest, and she heard faint and waterlogged and alive the sweetest sound she had ever heard in her life. 91. Oliver was whispering to himself in the dark. 92. 93. He was still counting. He had never stopped counting. Clara made a sound she would have been ashamed of in any other circumstance and put her hand over her own mouth. "Don't come closer," the young woman said. Her voice was thin and high, and her hands were shaking on the lamp. "Don't. You stay right there." "I'm staying," Clara said. "Look at me. I'm not moving. You're Samuel's sister." The girl's face cracked. "How do you—" "Your name." "Ruth. Ruth Calloway." "Ruth." Clara took one slow breath. "I know what that family did to yours. I know about the winter and the notes called due, and your brother sent off at 12 years old to work a debt that wasn't his. I know because they did the same thing to me. Eleanor Harrington stood in her own doorway and put me out in the rain 7 years ago, carrying those 3 boys, and told me I was nothing. So you and me, Ruth, we are the same. We are the exact same. We're the two women that family threw away. The difference is, I didn't know your name until an hour ago. And now I do, and I am so sorry for what was done to you that I could lie down in this road and weep over it." The girl was crying now openly, the lamp trembling in her grip. "You don't understand," she said. "You don't. They took everything. My mother died of it, of the shame and the cold. My brother came back a broken man, and he drinks now. And he can't work, he can't sleep. He just talks about that house, that family all the time, every day. What we'd do if we ever. And tonight I saw the little boy. I saw him standing there all alone counting. And he looked so much like he looked like Samuel did when he was small before." Her voice broke entirely. "I just wanted them to feel it. One time. I wanted them to know what it's like to have something small and helpless taken away in the cold. I wanted her to feel it." "I know," Clara said softly. "I know you did." "Then why are you looking at me like that?" "Like what? Like you're sorry for me?" "Because I am." Clara took one step, slow, hands open. "Ruth, look at that boy on the cot. Look real close at him. He is 7 years old, and he has done nothing to you the same as you did nothing to that family at 12. If you keep him, if you trade him, if you make him the coin you pay your grief with, then Eleanor Harrington wins. Do you hear me? She turns you into her. She makes you do to a child exactly what she did. That's the only thing she's good at, taking decent people and turning them cruel. And she's standing back at that ball right now, and she will live the rest of her comfortable life knowing she made one more mother out of a girl she ruined. Don't let her. Don't you let her have you too." Ruth Calloway stood in the doorway with the lamp shaking and the tears running, and looked back over her shoulder at the small boy on the cot. And behind Clara, very quietly, Nathaniel spoke for the first time. "Miss Calloway." She flinched at his voice, at the cut of it, the money in it, the very thing she hated. "I'm Nathaniel Harrington," he said, and he didn't come closer, and he kept his hands where she could see them, and his voice was the steadiest thing in that dark yard. "And I want to tell you something, and then I'll be quiet, and you can do whatever you decide. I didn't know what my mother did to your family. I want to say that plain, not as an excuse, because not knowing is its own kind of sin, but so you'll have the truth of it. I just learned it tonight, the same night I learned I have 3 sons. I have spent this entire evening finding out the size of what my family takes from people, and I am sick with it, Miss Calloway. I am sick to my soul." He drew a breath. "You wanted a Harrington to feel it. Well, here's one. Feeling it. I have known I had children for 3 hours, and one of them is already sitting in your house in the dark, and I cannot breathe for the fear of it. You did that. You made me feel it. The debt's paid. It worked. So you don't have to do the rest. You've already done the only part that was ever going to matter." The girl was sobbing now. "I don't know how to give him back," she whispered. I planned the taking. I didn't plan after. I don't know how." "You opened the door," Clara said gently, "and you let me come to him, and that's all. That's the whole of how. There's no trick to it, Ruth. You just open the door." And Ruth Calloway, 20 years old and ruined and grieving, and standing at the exact fork where a person becomes either their wound or something better than it, stepped back from the doorway and let it swing wide. Clara was across the room before she knew she'd moved. "Oliver," she said, and dropped to her knees by the cot, and he turned and saw her, and his whole small face came apart with relief. 98, he said, hiccuping, reaching for her. 99, 100. Mama, I got to 100. I got to 100 and I started over again, 'cause you weren't back yet. I started all the way over. I was on my 4th. I heard you." She had him now, both arms, all of him, his face buried in her neck and his fists in her hair, and her own tears falling into his collar. "I heard you counting the whole way up the road, baby. I heard you. You counted so good. You counted me right back to you." "The lady said you sent her." "I know. You didn't send her." "No, baby, I didn't. I shouldn't have let go your hand." "No." She pulled back just enough to take his wet face in both her hands and look at him fierce so he'd carry it. No, sweetheart, you listen to me. None of this was yours to carry. Not letting go, not getting lost, not any of it. You were brave and you were good. And you counted all the way up twice, and you waited for me, and I came, didn't I? I told you I'd come if you got to 100, and I came. I will always come. There is no 100 high enough that I won't come. Behind her, Nathaniel had not moved from the doorway. He was watching his son's face over Clara's shoulder the first time he had ever seen Oliver's face up close, the boy who'd been told to say his goodbyes and had refused to leave the one who held on. And there were tears running freely down a grown man's face in that ruined doorway, and he made no move to hide them or wipe them away. "Mama," Oliver whispered, catching sight of him. "That man's crying." Clara turned the boy still in her arms and looked at Nathaniel Harrington standing in the door of the house his mother had emptied 12 years before, weeping over a child he had known for the length of an evening, having just talked a grieving girl out of becoming the thing that had broken her, and something in the wall she'd built between them. The great 7-year wall of ice and grief shifted. It did not fall. It was nowhere near falling. But for the first time in the dark of that ruined house with her littlest boy safe and warm against her chest, Clara Whitmore looked at the man she'd hated for the better part of a decade, and saw underneath all of it the beginnings of someone she had not expected ever to see again. "Yes," she said quietly. "He is." And outside the summer dark held its breath, and a young woman named Ruth Calloway sat down on her own front step and wept for everything that had been taken while inside. For the first time in 7 years, a family that had never once been whole stood together in a single room. They did not speak of love on the ride home, or of the future, or of anything that mattered, because Oliver was asleep across both their laps before the carriage reached the main road, and some things a man and a woman simply cannot say over the head of a sleeping child. So they said the small things instead. "He's heavier than he looks," Nathaniel murmured. The boy's legs had ended up across his knees, and he held them the careful, frightened way a man holds something he's afraid to break. "He's all elbows," Clara said. "They all are. You'd not believe what they cost me in patched knees." "I'd believe it." "You wouldn't. You've never patched a knee in your life." "No." A pause. "No, I haven't. I'd like to learn how." Clara looked out at the dark. "Don't," she said. "Don't do that. Don't sit there with my sleeping boy on your knees and start making yourself a place at my table in your head, because I have not offered you one, and I am not going to. And if you start believing you've earned something tonight just because you cried in a doorway, then we are going to have trouble, you and I." "I don't believe I've earned anything." "Good. I helped get him back. That's all I did. Any man worth the name would have done the same, and most of them would have done it without first abandoning him for 7 years, so I'm aware it doesn't square the account." He shifted the boy gently. "But I'd like the chance to start paying it down, Clara. That's all I'm asking. Not the table, not your forgiveness, just the chance to start." She was quiet a long moment. "Then here are my terms," she said finally, "and you'll hear them once, and you'll not bargain because I am too tired tonight to bargain. You want to know your sons? You'll come to my house, not yours, mine. The 40 acres I bought tonight with my own money over your mother's dead objection. You'll come on Sunday afternoons for 1 hour, and you'll come on foot. No carriage rolling up to frighten them. No team of horses, no driver. You'll wear a plain coat. You'll bring no gifts, not one, not a sweet, not a toy, not a pony, because I will not have you buying their hearts the way your family buys land. And you'll come as Mr. Harrington, a man they're getting to know, and you will not tell them what you are to them. Not until I say. Not one word. That's mine to tell, and I'll tell it when they're ready, and not one day before. Do you understand me?" "Yes." "And the first time, Nathaniel, you raise your voice in my house, or go behind my back, or send your mother near my children, or try to make yourself their master instead of their guest, you are done. There's no second warning. You'll never see their faces again, and I'll move them so far north, you'll spend the rest of your money looking. Do you understand that too?" "Yes," he said. "Clara, yes, all of it, every word." "Then we have an arrangement. Now hush, you'll wake him." He hushed. And that was how it began. He came the first Sunday on foot 3 miles in the summer heat, in a plain brown coat, and he arrived sweated through and red-faced, and stood at the edge of her yard, like a man who'd never in his life had to wonder whether he'd be let in a door. The boys watched him from the porch with the flat, merciless judgment only children can manage. "You walked," Thomas said incredulous. "All the way in them shoes." "All the way." "Why didn't you ride?" "Your mother asked me not to." Thomas considered this. "She asks us not to do lots of things," he said. "We don't always listen." "Thomas?" Clara said from the doorway. "What I don't?" Nathaniel almost smiled. "Well," he said, "she frightens me a good deal more than she frightens you, I expect. So I listen." That somehow was the right thing to say. Thomas grinned for the first time since the ball. It was William who was the hard ground. William watched him, the way he watched everything quiet, total, missing nothing. And William did not warm, not that first Sunday, nor the second, nor the fifth. He answered when spoken to. He was never rude. Clara had not raised rude children. But he held himself at a careful distance, and his eyes followed the man around the kitchen, like a sentry tracking something across a fence line. And once in the 6th or 7th week, Clara overheard him say to Thomas, in the low voice he used when he didn't know she could hear, "Don't get to liking him too much." "Why not?" "Because Mama doesn't trust him, and Mama's never wrong about people, so don't." It near broke her heart that to hear her own caution come out of her 7-year-old's mouth, to see the cost of her armor printed on the child who'd learned it watching her. She'd built that wall to keep them safe. She hadn't reckoned on them building their own out of the same stone. Nathaniel kept coming. He never touched William's head, never reached for the boy, never pushed. He learned instead the thing it had taken Clara years to learn, that William could not be won only earned, and only with patience, and only by being week after week exactly who you said you'd be. So Nathaniel was. He came every Sunday. He came on foot. He brought no gifts. He drank Clara's coffee and praised it whether it was good or not, and he laughed at Thomas's impressions of the town clerk until tears stood in his eyes, and he sat on the floor and let Oliver explain to him at exhaustive length the names and natures of every animal Oliver had ever met, and he left every single Sunday at the exact moment Clara told him to leave without one word of complaint, and slowly, so slowly that Clara could not have named the Sunday. It happened the man wore a groove into their week. It was the Sunday in late August that it tipped. He'd been there the better part of an hour, and Oliver had fallen and skinned his knee, chasing the neighbor's dog through the side yard, and he'd come in howling, and Clara had reached for him on reflex the way she always did. And Oliver, sobbing blind, with the small enormous grief of a child's hurt, had run straight past his mother's open arms and thrown himself against Nathaniel Harrington's legs instead. The kitchen went still. Clara froze with her arms half out. Nathaniel looked down at the boy clinging to his shins, and looked up at Clara, stricken frightened, asking with his whole face what he was permitted to do, and Clara, after a moment that lasted a year, gave him the smallest nod she had ever given anyone. He bent down. He gathered the boy up awkward careful, like a man who'd never held a crying child in his life, because he hadn't. "All right," he said low, the way you'd gentle a colt. "All right now. Let's have a look. That's a fine scrape. That's a champion scrape. You'll have a scar off that one, and scars are how you know a fellow's lived a little." "It hurts," Oliver wailed. "Course it does. Worst kind of hurt a skinned knee. I've had 100 of them." He hadn't. They both knew he hadn't. But he said it, and Oliver believed it, and that was the whole of what the boy needed. "Tell you what. You hold real still, and your mama'll fix it up, and I'll hold you the whole time so it can't get worse. Deal." "Deal," Oliver hiccuped, and he held the boy through the whole of it, and Oliver let himself be held and across the kitchen. William watched with his small face, working through something far too large for it. Clara saw the wall in her eldest son start to come down, and she knew watching it that the time had come that she could not keep the truth from them much longer without it becoming its own kind of lie, the very kind she'd spent the night of the ball pretending to be a widow over. They were getting attached. He was becoming real to them. And a child who loves a man has the right to know who that man is before the loving goes too deep to survive the knowing. So that night, after Nathaniel had gone, she sat all three of them down at the kitchen table. "I have to tell you something," she said, "and it's a big thing, the biggest thing, and I need you to be brave for me one more time the way you were brave at the ball. Can you do that?" They nodded solemn, all three. "Mr. Harrington," Clara said, and her voice was steady because she'd made it be the man who comes on Sundays. "He's not a stranger. He's—" She stopped, started again. There was no soft way down this road, so she took the plain one. "He's your father. Your real father. He didn't know about you not for a long time, because of a thing some people did a long time ago that wasn't your fault and wasn't mine. But he's your father. And now he knows. And that's why he comes." The silence after was the longest of her life. Thomas broke it first, the way Thomas broke everything. "Our father's not dead," he said. "You said he died of a fever. At the ball. You said—" "I lied at the ball, baby. I lied to keep us safe. I'm sorry for it." "So we have a father?" Thomas's voice climbed. "A real one. That's him. That whole time the walking 3 miles man, the coffee man that was our father, and nobody told us." He was halfway between thrilled and furious, and Clara couldn't tell which would win. Did he know, when he held Oliver's knee? Did he know he was holding his own boy's knee, and he didn't say anything? He knew. I told him not to say. That was my doing, Thomas, not his. I wanted to be the one to tell you. "Why? Because you're mine," Clara said simply. "And the hardest things ought to come from the person who loves you most." Thomas absorbed this. His chin wobbled. Then, in the way of children, he leapt straight past the grief to the practical. "Does that mean he has to come more than Sundays now because Sundays isn't enough? I have a lot of things to tell him." Clara almost laughed, almost wept. "We'll see," she said. "We'll see, baby, one thing at a time." But it was Oliver she was watching, and it was William she was afraid for. Oliver had gone very quiet, his skinned knee forgotten working it through behind those soft eyes. "The man who held me," he said slowly, "when I was crying. That's my papa." "Yes, sweetheart." "I picked him." Oliver looked up, wondering. "When I fell down, I ran to him and I didn't even know. I picked my own papa and I didn't even know it was him. And that I picked my own papa and I didn't even know it was him was the thing that finally broke Clara, and she had to turn away to the stove so her children wouldn't see their mother cry. William said nothing at all. William sat at the table with his hands folded in front of him, and he did not cry, and he did not ask questions, and he did not leap to anything, and the silence coming off him was worse than any of it. Clara wiped her face and turned back and crouched down by his chair. "William," she said softly, "talk to me, baby." He wouldn't look at her. "Where was he?" William said finally. His voice was very small and very flat. "When Oliver was sick, when you said the lady told you to say goodbye, when we didn't have enough wood that one winter and you gave us your blanket and said you weren't cold but you were. I saw you shaking, I saw you. Where was he?" Clara's throat closed. "He didn't know about us, baby. I told you. He could have looked." William turned and met her eyes then, and they were full and furious, and far too old. "You found work. You found the farm. You found Judge Pembroke and the bank, and 40 acres. You found all of that with nobody helping you, and he had everything. He had carriages and money, and a whole big house, and he couldn't find us. He couldn't find one lady and 3 babies. The tears spilled over at last, and he swiped at them, furious to be crying. "I don't believe he didn't know. I think he didn't look. And I don't want a father who didn't look." Clara gathered him in, and he let her stiff at first and then not. And she held her eldest son while he shook with everything he'd been carrying since the ball, and she did not tell him he was wrong. Because he wasn't. Not entirely. That was the worst of it. "You're right," she whispered into his hair. "You're right that he should have looked. He says it himself. He says not looking was its own sin, even if he believed the lie. He's not asking you to pretend it didn't happen, William. He's not asking you to call him Papa, or love him, or forgive him. He's just asking for the chance to be there now. And what you do with that chance, whether you take it, whether you trust it, whether you ever let him in at all, that's yours, baby. That's nobody's to decide but you. Not mine. Not his. Yours. William cried himself empty against her shoulder. And the following Sunday, when Nathaniel came up the road on foot in his plain coat, Clara met him at the edge of the yard before he reached the porch. "They know," she said. He stopped, went pale. "All of them. All of them. And Thomas has roughly 400 questions and considers Sundays insufficient. Oliver." Her voice caught. "Oliver says he picked you. When he fell. He says he ran to his own papa and didn't know it." She watched that land on the man, watched it nearly take his legs out from under him. "And William." She held his eyes. "William knows you didn't look. He said it plain. He said he doesn't want a father who didn't look for us. And I didn't tell him he was wrong, Nathaniel, because he isn't so. Don't you dare go in there and try to talk him out of his own true feeling. You hear me? You let that boy be angry. He's earned it. You earned it for him." Nathaniel stood in the yard a long moment, gathering himself. "All right," he said quietly. "All right. Then I won't ask him for anything. I'll just keep coming." He walked up to the porch where the three of them waited. Thomas launched into him immediately, breathless, 400 questions deep before the man had cleared the steps. Oliver slipped a hand into his without a word and held on the way. He held on to things that mattered, the way he'd held Clara's sleeve at the ball fingers wound in tight, and Nathaniel looked down at that small hand in his and had to stop and breathe. And William stood apart by the porch rail, arms crossed, watching. Judging, not warming, not yet, maybe not for a long time, but he stood there. He didn't go inside. He stayed. And Nathaniel Harrington looked at his eldest son standing guarded at the rail and did not push and did not reach and did not say one word he hadn't earned, and across the yard, drying her hands on her apron, in her own doorway, on her own 40 acres. Clara watched the four of them, her three boys, and the man who'd come back too late, and was trying anyway, and felt the great 7-year wall of ice inside her chest crack clean down the middle and let for the first time a single thin blade of light come through. The light came through, but the wall did not fall all at once, because walls built over 7 years do not fall all at once. And Clara had never been a woman who trusted a thing that happened fast. What changed first was not her heart. It was Nathaniel's spine. He came to her on a Sunday in early September, with something held tight behind his eyes, and he waited until the boys were down at the creek with their nets before he said it. "I went to see my mother," he said. "3 days ago. I've not told you because I wanted it done before I spoke of it, so I couldn't be talked out of it, not by you and not by myself." Clara set down the bowl she was drying. "And she had a proposal." His jaw was tight. "She always has a proposal. She said she'd had her lawyer draw papers, she'd acknowledge the boys, bring them into the family, make them Harrington's proper with the name and the inheritance and a claim on the whole estate when she's gone, William the eldest, the principal heir, the lot of it." He looked at her. "All you'd have to do is give them to her to raise. Send them to be brought up at the house. Under her hand. Schooled by her people, shaped by her, made into Harringtons, the way she understands the word. And in exchange they'd never want for anything as long as they lived." The old cold went straight through Clara. "She wants my children. She wants to win," Nathaniel said. "She's wanted to win her whole life, and she's old now, and she can feel the winning slipping, and those 3 boys are the last hand she's got to play. She'd dress it up as generosity. She'd call it their future. But it's the same thing she's always done, find the thing a person can't bear to lose, and make them trade it for a roof." He drew a breath. "I told her no." "You told her." "I told her no, and then I told her the rest." His voice didn't rise, but it had gone hard as a frozen rut. "I told her I'd had the lawyer draw papers of my own, that I was signing over my interest in the estate to a trust, every acre, every note, every dollar of it, and that the trust would be administered for the benefit of the families this house has ruined. The Callaways first, then the others and Clara. There are others I've spent a month finding their names. There's a ledger of people my mother put off their land going back 40 years, and every one of them is getting something back. I'm keeping nothing but enough to live plain. I told her I'd rather walk 3 miles in a brown coat every Sunday of my life than spend one more day as the heir to what that money is. He swallowed. She said I was throwing away everything our family built. And I told her our family didn't build it. Our family took it, and I was done taking. Clara stared at him. You gave it away, she said slowly. All of it, the whole estate. Nearly, yes. For people you've never met, for the Callaways, for a girl who took our son. For our son, Nathaniel said quietly, and for the man I'd like him to be able to call a father someday without it being a lie. William asked where I was, Clara. He asked where I was when you were freezing. I can't go back and be there. God knows I'd give the rest of my life to. But I can be the kind of man who, when he finally learns the truth of what his family is, does the hard thing instead of the comfortable one. It won't square it. Nothing squares it. But it's the only answer I had to William's question that wasn't an excuse. He looked down at his hands. I'd rather my sons inherit a clean name and an empty pocket than a full one, and the truth of where it came from. For a long moment, Clara could not speak. She had spent 7 years building a fortress out of the certainty that this man was weak, that he had chosen comfort over her, the easy lie over the hard truth every single day. It had been the load-bearing wall of her whole life, and he had just walked into her kitchen and taken it down with his own 2 hands. You should have asked me, she finally said, before you gave away your son's inheritance. It wasn't an inheritance, Nathaniel said. It was a debt with their name on it. I wasn't going to make them carry it. I've carried enough of my mother's bills in my life. They won't carry one. And that was the thing that was the exact thing that finally moved Clara Whitmore. Not the tears in the doorway. Not the 3 miles on foot. Not the held knee, or the patience with William, or the 400 questions answered without complaint. It was this, a man choosing his children's clean conscience over their comfort, the way she had chosen it for them 100 times in a cold cabin alone, when no one was watching and there was no reward in it at all. He had finally done the thing she'd done. He had finally been poor for them on purpose. Sit down, she said, her voice strange in her own ears. I'll put the coffee on. It was Mrs. Harrington who made the last play, of course. Her kind always did. She came to Clara's house the only time she ever set foot on the 40 acres in a black carriage that pulled up to the edge of the yard, and she did not get out, because getting out would have meant standing on ground she'd lost. So she sent her driver to the door to summon Clara to her like a servant. Clara went out to the carriage and stood beside it with her arms folded and did not curtsy. You've turned my son against me, Mrs. Harrington said through the window. You've made him a pauper. You've made him a fool. He's given away 4 generations of this family to a parcel of beggars and a girl who's a common kidnapper, and he did it for you, and you let him. I didn't let him do anything, Clara said. He's a grown man. He decided. That's new for him deciding, and I'll grant it took him long enough, but he got there. You think you've won. I don't think about winning, Clara said. That's you. That's your whole life winning, and look at it. You're sitting alone in a carriage at the edge of a yard you'll never be let into, and your son won't speak to you, and your grandsons don't know your face, and the only person on this earth who'd notice if you died tonight is the driver you pay to notice. She leaned in close so the old woman could see there was no fear left anywhere in her. You put me out in the rain 7 years ago, and you thought you'd ended me. And here I stand on my own land with my 3 boys safe in that house, and the man you raised standing in my kitchen, choosing them over you. You didn't end me, Eleanor. You just made me. Every hard thing I am because of what you did. And now I'm going to use all of it to make sure not one child in this county ever gets put out in the cold by a Harrington again. So thank you. You built the very thing that's going to bury everything you stood for. Now get off my land. Mrs. Harrington opened her mouth. "There's nothing left in it," Clara said. "Whatever you were about to say. There's nothing left in it. You spent it all. Go home." And she turned her back on the woman, the one thing no one had ever dared do, and walked into her own house and shut her own door, and the black carriage sat a long while at the edge of the yard, before at last it turned and rolled away, and Clara never saw Eleanor Harrington's face again. The Callaways got their land back. It was Clara who insisted on it. Clara who would not let the trust treat them like just another name in the ledger. She went out to the ruined house herself, with Nathaniel, and with bread she'd baked, and with the deed restored, and she found Ruth on the same front step where the girl had wept, and Samuel inside gaunt and shaking, and half afraid to look at the people he'd spent 12 years hating. "We're not here for an apology," Clara told them. "You took my son Ruth, and I'll carry the fear of that night to my grave, and I won't pretend I won't. But I know who put the cruelty in you, same as she put it in herself, and I'm not in the business of finishing her work. Your land's yours again, free and clear. There's seed money in the trust to work it. And there's a doctor coming Thursday for your brother paid for no charge for as long as it takes." She set the bread down. "You don't owe us thanks. You don't owe us anything. The debt this family owed yours is paid, and it's paid the only way a debt like that ever can be, by giving back the exact thing that was taken. The ground. That's all anybody ever wanted. The ground to stand on." Ruth Calloway wept again, but it was a different weeping. "Why?" she said. "After what I did, why would you—" "Because somebody has to stop," Clara said. "Somebody somewhere in this long, ugly chain has to be the one who says enough and takes the hit and doesn't pass it on. Your mother couldn't. Mine couldn't. Eleanor never would. So it's us, Ruth, you and me, the two she threw away. We're going to be the ones who stop it." She held out her hand. "Starting now." Ruth took it, and the cycle after 40 years broke in a ruined yard between two women who had every reason to destroy each other and chose instead not to. It was William who took the longest. Clara had known he would. Thomas had forgiven Nathaniel by October loudly and completely the way Thomas did everything. Oliver had never needed to forgive him at all. Oliver had simply decided that day he ran to the man's legs with a skinned knee that this was his papa, and that was the end of it. But William held out through the fall and into the winter, polite and distant and watchful, and Nathaniel let him, never pushing, just coming Sunday after Sunday, being exactly who he said he'd be, until being it became the truth. The wall came down on a January morning. It came down over nothing, the way the biggest things always do. William had been working a sum at the kitchen table, a hard one, and he'd gotten it wrong 3 times and slammed the slate down in a fury. And Nathaniel, who'd been quiet by the fire, said without looking up, "Show me where you started." William glared at him. "You don't know how. You never patched a knee or chopped wood or did any of it. Mama said." "No." Nathaniel agreed. "I don't know how to do most things worth knowing, but I know sums. They're the one thing they did teach me. Show me where you started." And William, exhausted, defeated, 7 years old, and so tired of being the one who held the line, pushed the slate across the table. Nathaniel looked at it a long moment. "You started right," he said. "You just lost faith in the middle and changed an answer that was already true. You do that sometimes when a thing's gone hard. You stop trusting the work you already did." He slid it back. "Don't. The early part was good. Trust it. Carry it through." William looked at the slate. He looked at the man. And something in the boy's face, some long-held white-knuckled grip, finally quietly let go. "Will you stay till I finish it?" William said. It wasn't quite a question. "I'll stay as long as you'll have me," Nathaniel said. It was not, "I love you." And it was not Papa. And it was not forgiveness. Not yet. Not all the way. But William moved over on the bench to make room, and Nathaniel came and sat beside his eldest son, and they did the sum together, and Clara stood at the stove with her back to them, so they wouldn't see her face. And outside, the January snow came down soft over the 40 acres, and the Great Wall. The last of it, the load-bearing stone of 7 hard years, came down at last, in a warm kitchen over a boy's arithmetic. They never did have a grand wedding. There was no rushed remarriage. No magical day where all the hurt was washed away because Clara would not have believed in it, and Nathaniel had finally learned not to offer her things she couldn't believe. What there was instead was slower and truer than any of that. There was a spring and then a summer, and a man who kept coming until the coming wore a groove so deep it became a staying. There was a quiet morning more than a year on when Nathaniel asked her, not on his knees, not with a ring his mother had bought, but plain across her own kitchen table, whether she might consider letting him stay past the hour, past the Sunday, past all of it for good. "I won't be a dependent wife," Clara said. "The land stays mine. The deed stays in my name. I built this with my own hands, and I'll not sign it over to any man, not even you, not ever. Those are my terms, and they don't bend." "I'd not ask you to bend them," Nathaniel said. "I gave away a whole estate, Clara. I'm not looking to own yours. I'm looking to be let in your door. Then you can stay," she said. "Past the hour, past the Sunday." She looked at him a long moment across the table where her sons had eaten 10,000 meals. Past all of it. And that was the whole of the proposal, and the whole of the answer, and it was enough because they had both learned the hard way that the quiet true thing outlasts the grand false one every time. The 5th chair at Clara's kitchen table was no longer empty after that. The years went on. The way years do fast at the end and slow in the middle, and the 3 boys grew the way boys grow into themselves and away from her and back again. William grew thoughtful and steady and exact. The boy who'd asked, "Where were you?" became a man who showed up always for everyone, the kind of man you'd trust to carry the thing that mattered through to the end without losing faith in the middle. Thomas grew brave and loud and full of stories, the kind people leaned toward at a table, and he never did run out of questions, and the answering of them filled his father's later years with more laughter than the man had ever thought he'd be allowed. And Oliver, the littlest, the one who'd been told he'd die, the one who counted to 100 in the dark and refused to stop the one who picked his own papa before he knew it, Oliver grew up to be a doctor. He rode the whole county near and far in all weather, and it was said of him that he gave away more medicine than he ever charged for, that he'd sit a whole night with a poor family's child and take a loaf of bread for his trouble and call it square. When folks asked him why he did it, why he wore himself thin, tending people who could never pay Oliver, would only say that someone had once sat up with him when he was too small to remember it, and refused to let him go, and counted him back into the world, and that a debt like that, the only way to pay it, is to spend your life handing it on. Clara lived to see all of it. She lived to see the cold cabin become a warm house, and the empty chair filled, and the boy who'd nearly died ride out to save other people's children. She lived to see the man who'd come back too late spend 30 years being early to everything else. And on the evenings near the end, when her grandchildren asked her to tell the story, the ball, the triplets, the man across the room who froze, she would tell it true, all of it. The rain and the road and the night in the ruined house. And they would ask her every time the same question children always ask. Did he deserve you, Grandmama? After everything. And Clara Whitmore, who had been put out in the rain and had walked 300 miles and birthed 3 sons alone and built a life out of nothing, with her own 2 stubborn hands would look at the white head of the old man, asleep in the 5th chair by the fire, and she would tell them the only true thing she had ever learned about love in the whole long course of her life. Love is not the man who never wrongs you, and it is not the grand word spoken on a knee, and it is not the wealth or the name or the regret that comes too late to matter. Love is the one who, having failed, does the hard, slow work of earning his way back 3 miles on foot one Sunday at a time, asking for nothing and owed even less, and keeps coming until the coming becomes a staying and the staying becomes a home. And no title, no fortune, and no winter she ever survived had taught her half so much as that.